I don't know if you've noticed or not, but there's a lot of manure piling up in our world. Figurative manure. People spewing it, piling it up with their opinions, usually aimed at trying to heave the manure at someone else from a different perspective. And all the while it just piles up on both sides. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. And I began to wonder, how are we as Christians to refrain from jumping to one side or the other, if in fact it is Christ who calls us to stand in the middle and live in tension? Maybe there is a third way that we haven't thought about that are hidden plainly within the words of Christ. And so we come to the Sermon on the Mount. We come to the core teachings of Jesus. We don't have to hear the words through Paul. We don't have to expound them from a prophet of the Old Testament. They come to us in the red letters in our Bibles directly from Christ, as recorded in this case by the disciple Matthew. The Beatitudes. So I got to thinking about this stuff piling up around us, and I wondered what the church had to say, and I came across this old hymn. For those of you in need of an optical exam, that says at the top, number 111, there's crap on the door. Now, why it's important for us to get all the facts before we come up with an opinion. We might think, my goodness, look at that font. That's a early 1800s hymnal. Look at the way the notes are drawn. That's a very old hymnal. My goodness, was that word used in a different occasion? Nope, that pretty much meant the same thing back then that it means now. Ring the bell softly, there's crap on the door. And then you continue to read on, and it's actually a hymn about someone who has passed away and the family is mourning on the inside. So if you go to the house, knock softly. But it's not supposed to be crap on the door, it's supposed to be crepe. There's supposed to be an E at the end of the P. Because the Victorian practice was that if the house was in mourning, you would put crepe over the front door so that people would know that was a house of mourning, so that you could be respectful and reverent and show your... Because if you think about the old Victorian houses, when you first walk in, what's the first room to your left or right? The formal room? Anybody? The parlor. That's why the first funeral homes were called funeral parlors. Because early Americans were still part of the understanding from the old world that when we lost a loved one, we still kept that whole experience within our home. We didn't farm it out to get death away so we didn't have to look at it. We kept it right in front of us, and we grieved and we mourned. Probably a little more healthy than we do today. But yeah, so it's important for us to get the whole story before we make up our minds about even a hymn. Needless to say, that didn't make it through the editor's desk quite in time, so it never went out. And for some reason, a lot of hymnal companies wouldn't pick it up. You don't find any old Methodist hymnals with there's crap on the door, number 111, for that. So I got to thinking, what is something that's important for us as Christians to know? And I think it's the most important thing for us is, with so many things that have different ways to interpret them or to experience them, there's some things that read one way and one group says it's this, another group says it's that. Are there anything that we can come back to the core and begin again together and live in the tension? And the Beatitudes are where it's at. So what I did this week for you is I went back through the ancient Greek, and I went through to see and make sure there weren't any hidden meanings in there that would be really important for our time. So I kind of retranslated the Beatitudes, and so there's more words than there are in the Bible so that it would get a deeper feel. So if there were 3 words that meant the same thing, I gave you all 3 words and just kind of tried to poetically put them together. Not like a poem, but more something else. So let's go through those and see if it makes a difference, and maybe it speaks to you today. So as we go through, blessed are those reduced to beggary in their soul, broken down and hopeless, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You see, when the Bible's written in Greek, and when Jesus is preaching in either Greek or Aramaic, could have been preaching in Hebrew too, those are all ancient languages that each word has multiple meanings. That if you had somebody really smart, which I really believe Jesus was a very smart speaker, There could be dual meanings in things that we might not pick up on. We just always go for the literal because that's what English is. English is a literal language, so when we go into it, we think, well, this is what it means, this is it, it can't mean anything else. But it comes to us first in a language that can mean all kinds of different things and can be interpreted in different ways. That's why we have so many denominations. That's why we have so many church splits, is because we can't agree on which side to approach this text from. But these are pretty standard. It's even when you blow out all the different meanings, it still comes right down to the same thing. But I think this is a little more in depth to kind of help you feel what Jesus is trying to get you to feel. Those are reduced to beggary in their soul, to the point where you've been reduced to just spiritual poverty and have your hand out saying, Lord, help me. For those people, in that moment, they will know how important God is and how desperately they need God. And in that moment, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who feel guilty and lament over what they've lost or what they have done, for they will be comforted. For people who think about the life before Christ, for people who think about someone they've lost, all different kind of ways that we can grieve, we always go literal. We think a loved one, a close loved one that we've lost and we're grieving. But grief can also be over something that we've left undone or something that we've done. It can mean regret. It can mean remorse. And so this is a reminder that in Christianity, you can make mistakes, feel bad for them, and be forgiven for them, that there's grace for you. Blessed are those who have gone through that darkness and may realize that they will be comforted. Blessed are the gentle and kind, the forgiving and the humane, for they will inherit the earth. So those are all the different meanings for the word we translate meek. Meek means gentle, kind, forgiving, and humane. So if we tried to come to an understanding as Christians that these are the bedrock identity markers for us, are we, as people, as human beings, are we being gentle and kind? Are we being forgiving and humane to others, as individuals, as a group? Blessed are those who long for the depth of their from the depth of their very soul for fair, equitable dealings of justice, integrity, and virtue. Fair, equitable dealings of justice, integrity, and virtue is what we translate righteousness. And see, in Christianity, it's really easy for us just to say the word righteousness, even though I very rarely know what exactly that means. What do you mean by righteousness? Oh, righteousness. Under the dictionary, it uses its own word for its own definition. See righteousness, also righteousness. That's it. No, it means fair, equitable dealings of justice, integrity, and virtue. That is a much deeper understanding of what righteousness means. This is like real social gospel movement stuff for Christians. Look into the mid-1800s. About the time that On the Wall Doors hymn was written, there was a man by the name of Walter Rauschenbusch. Was a fantastic Congregationalist preacher, and he pretty much started what we call the social gospel movement. If you ever get a chance to read his stuff, it's beautiful stuff. Blessed are the compassionate, for they will receive the same measure of their care. As you have been caring and compassionate, people identify you as caring and compassionate. What happens when you hit a rough patch? What you've given comes right back to you, because people are like, they've been taking such good care of everyone else. Let's go take care of them. Jesus is telling us that you can't do Christianity isolated. It has to be done in community. That's the only way that it works. That's the only way that we can keep challenging you to give and to give and to serve, because it's with the understanding that we all do it together in community, so that the moment that you can't serve anymore, you can't give anymore, then you start to receive and be served. And that's the way community is supposed to work. So blessed are the compassionate, for they will receive the same measure of the care that they've given out. Blessed are those who from the depth of their identity are innocent and clean, for they will see God. For the pure in heart. Those who from the depth of their identity, who you are innocent and clean. Not free from mistakes. It just means that you are pure in heart. You legitimately care about other people. You legitimately put their needs ahead of your own. Basically, and then I retranslated it in more simple terms. For those who are good when no one's looking. Are we good when no one's looking? Blessed are those who cultivate peace and concord, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. What's a peacemaker? That was a cult that old Wyatt Earp carried on him back in the days in Tombstone. Well, yeah, that's true. But what does Jesus mean by peacemaker? Blessed are those who cultivate peace. Like a farmer, do you prepare the soil of peace? Do you plant a crop of peace? Do you harvest a crop of peace? Are you in a process of understanding that peace just doesn't happen because you're kind? Peace needs to be cultivated. It needs to start with mutual respect and reverence and all these different kinds of things depending on what area of community, family, or friendship that we're engaging. Those are all important things for us to know. For they will be called children of God. People who cultivate peace will be called children of God. The people who look for middle ways will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are chaste as enemies for the sake of fair, equitable dealings in justice, integrity, and virtue, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So we already know what for the sake of equitable dealings in justice and integrity, that's righteousness. Blessed are those who are chaste as enemies, chased down. Someone's running you down because of your belief that everyone should be treated fairly and loved through the eyes of God. People won't like that. If you start saying that everyone's equal in the eyes of God, that everyone's loved equally in the eyes of God, that all are sinners in the eyes of God, for all have fallen short of the glory of God, people will chase you down because they'll have different exceptions they want to include, and they're usually in that group. We are all equal in the eyes of God. And when we try to pursue that equality, not just for ourselves but for others, well, the reaction's not typically too strongly positive. Blessed are you when people try to shut your mouth and mock and insult you and chase you down on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is a long track record. This has been going on for quite some time. All the way back, Jesus says, in the time of the prophets, when someone be just kind of hanging out in their tent, God would speak to them, they'd be like, no, are you seriously wanting me to do that? Seriously? You think of the prophet who had to go and tell David that God saw what David did with Bathsheba, and what David did to Bathsheba's husband. That wasn't a fun job. Or Jonah, who just says, nope, not going to do it. He takes off running. How'd that end for him? Very gross. It was a very gross ending for Jonah because that fish swallowed him and then unswallowed him onto the beach. We'll just say it that way because we're going to eat chili here in a little bit. So he just did that. So the prophets of God have always had these rough lives. And I think we take for granted how good it is for us as American Christians because all we got to worry about when we go to the parking lot is ice. We don't have to worry about people with guns and hoods and stuff going, oh, did you worship the Christ? Yes, and just, mows us all down and beheads us and stuff. But there are places in this world that Christians do have to worry about that. And so I think at some point we have to rationalize back through what it means for the whole of Christianity all over the world, and not just our experience in it. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. And I think we look for rewards great here on earth. But Jesus said that if you do that, if you make all of your energy for the sake of building up what's here on earth that can be destroyed by natural disaster, by moth, then you're missing the point. You need to store up your treasures in the kingdom of heaven, which means the unseen actions of love and integrity and kindness and grace and mercy and peace towards others. All right, so then he goes, those are the Beatitudes. Then he goes into salt and light. Salt. You are the wisdom and the prudence of all the people. Because you are the salt of the earth. So the earth kind of really means the population and all the people, all the communities is where that kind of Greek word comes into. So you are the wisdom and the prudence of all the people. That sounds like a really huge job. You're the wisdom and prudence of all the people. You are supposed to be the voice of wisdom and reason when other people can't find their way. When they are so piled up in the stuff, we as Christians are supposed to find a way where there is no way because God will make that way known to us. And so that, as a Christian, is a core value of what we are supposed to be about. You are the wisdom and the prudence of all the people. So then what's light? You are the light of the world. You are the radiant presence of God in all of the material universe. Because in world, the Greek word is cosmos, which means the entire material created everything. No exception, everything. What's that include? Everything. You are the radiant presence of God. You are the prudent presence of wisdom, and you are the radiant presence of a deity that is known as love itself. Pack that with everything we just heard from Jesus about the Beatitudes. And what kind of Christian does he want us to be? What kind of person is Christ calling you to be? Do the Beatitudes challenge you at all? Do they give you hope at all? Because in the Beatitudes, it challenges us in a way to help us grow. And it convicts us in a way to turn back onto the right path. But we've got a unique job as Christians, because when Jesus said you're the salt of the earth, there's another meaning to that. There's another meaning to you are the salt of the earth. Because we find out from Job, and we find out from the Midrash, which is the extra commentary on the Hebrew Bible, that houses had these double stoves, millstones for grinding. They had a dung heap where they piled all the waste from their livestock, chickens, cattle. The earthen oven was used to burn the dung as fuel. To burn the dung as fuel. The dung heap was salted, and then plates of salt were used in the ovens to make sure that the dung would ignite efficiently and burn longer, to be used as fuel. Jesus says salt loses its saltiness when the exhausted plates no longer serve to facilitate burning. Unlike Matthew, in Luke, we get this. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. They throw it away. Let anyone with ears to hear listen. Luke already put it in there. Matthew was an earlier version. He just assumed everybody knew what salt was used for. It was used as a mineral. It was used to season and preserve your food. But it was also, in a practical way, used to heat so that you could cook and do things. To use manure. So what's Jesus telling us when he says you're the salt of the earth? You are the power by which the dung that is piling up on this polarized world where people can't get along, that if you're in one camp or the other, that you are that unique presence that can take that dung as the salt of the earth and burn it down so it's not so oppressive, so we can see each other, so we can talk to each other, so we can listen to each other. You are the salt of the earth. But if you give up, if you lose your saltiness, if you expend it out, what is the point? Well, you'll just sit around and watch it all pile up like everybody else. But Jesus says, no. You are my follower. You know better. You know not to just sit back and let everybody fight it out. You know to step in there and say, let's burn some of this down. This is too much stuff. If you prefer that word that you think I might have just said, say it in your head, and I'll pray that I don't accidentally say it. So, there you go. But it fits. It fits. But you have to stay salty. And I don't mean that in the way that the vernacular that the young people use today, where when I was a kid, salty was used for if it was expensive. I'd say, Mom, can I have those new Air Jordans? She's like, oh, sweetie, those are too salty. I'm like, oh, too expensive. I know that's the way it works. But salty today means annoying, kind of like salt in a wound. Oh my gosh, did you have to sit next to her on the bus? Yeah, she was so salty, I was about ready to lose my mind. Well, don't be that either. But in the sense that salt is a flavor and a taste and a mineral that is useful, being salty means filled with the marks of living like Jesus. And the way Paul said it was that we would exemplify to other people love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do any of those words feel applicable when we think about our world that we live in, where we can't get along with others because we're piling things up on two sides? I don't see a lot of love and joy and peace and forbearance and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control, because there have to be Christians on both sides of issues working for peace. We're always going to disagree on politics. We're always going to disagree on the way government needs to run, and that's fine. That's the way our system's supposed to work. But the garbage that's coming out right now and the way people are hating is not appropriate, and it's not helpful, and it's definitely not useful for our country or our communities. And so Jesus says to the Christian, be the salt of the earth. Take the dung and burn it so that we can see clearly on how to work together. Don't give up your principles, don't give up your perspectives, and do not give up your voice. But do so in your own camp that you've chosen as a Christian. And burn the dung down. If Christians aren't Christians like Jesus teaches us to be, and we just reflect the culture where we live instead of making where we are more like the kingdom of God, more like the kingdom of heaven, then we have lost our saltiness. And we cannot help to burn the dung of this world and keep it from piling up. You are the salt of the earth. It is a dirty job, but you've been called to do it. You are the salt that helps burn the manure of this world. That's the Christ we serve. That's what he teaches. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.